Hey everybody, it's Matt Erpelding from the Boise Metro Chamber of Commerce. And today we're going to be joined by three guests who have detailed and intimate knowledge about our phase 2 reopening plan. But before we get to our guests, I just want to thank Shamrock Foods, Cisco Foods, and Gravity Payments. As you know, the Boise Metro Chamber of Commerce is highly dependent upon the investment and support of our members. And we know full well that many of our members are struggling right now, and we feel very, very lucky to have the support that we have so that we can provide critical information to our community as we work through this pandemic. As many of you know, Governor Little has a press conference scheduled for later this afternoon. And so a lot of what we talk about today will be prefaced on the fact that the final decision is left to the governor, and his decision at 1 o'clock will drive our future plans. So with that, again, I want to thank our sponsors, Shamrock Foods, Cisco, and Gravity Payments. And with that, I'd like to introduce our three panelists for today, starting with Dan Price. Dan is an Idaho native and founder of Gravity Payments, which he founded at 19 years old in his own dorm room in college. Gravity Payments has an office here in Boise, located on Main and 27th, and we are very happy to have him join us today. Also, Kevin Settles, who is the owner and founder of Bardonnay Restaurants and a new restaurant in Eagle called Coin. We're very excited to have him because of his expertise and his involvement in the Idaho Restaurant Association and the United States Restaurant Association. And finally, Patrick Bagent is a first-term city councilman, an Idaho native, and somebody who's intimately involved with the city's ordinances as they relate to the COVID-19 pandemic. So with that, I'd like to start with you, Patrick. If you could give us some clarification, because as it stands right now, there's a little bit of confusion between the governor's plans and the city's plans. And I know there was a big meeting at City Council on Tuesday night. So if you could just start and give us a little bit of clarification.
Yeah, it's been a challenging and difficult last, 10 or 14 days since the current order came out. I think maybe the best way to explain it is to start with what the city intends. What we want to do and what we plan to do is follow the governor's plans and be in, to the extent that we can, be in lockstep with the state, unless there's a compelling reason to depart from that. So, for example, if the state COVID-19 cases were trending down, but here in the city of Boise, they were trending up radically, then we might depart from the governor's plan in some particular way to address that. We issued an order that's currently in effect, and it will be until the governor goes to phase 2, which may happen later today. It may not. We're all waiting to see. We have an order that expires in 30 days, and that created a lot of confusion. People saw that and said, well, it looks like the governor might be going to phase 2 in less than 30 days, but this order says it expires in 30 days. What does that mean? Well, we didn't intend it to mean that, and I think there are a number of different ways to read the order, but the mayor has clarified and council has clarified that when the governor goes to phase 2, the order that's in place now requiring social distancing for 30 days will be revisited, amended, repealed, and a new one will go into place. We anticipate that new order, whenever it comes, will permit restaurants to open, will permit hair salons to open, just as the governor's phase 2 plan does, subject to the types of restrictions that the governor is going to put in place. For instance, these establishments that are serving a lot of people need to have what the governor is calling business protocols in place. They need to be approved or at least submitted to the Department of Health that outline, how far apart people can be, what they're going to do for sanitation, occupancy objectives, things like that. We will keep those, if the governor asks for those, we will keep those in place as well. And we will try as hard as we can to dovetail with the governor's plan throughout phase 2 and phase 3 and phase 4. The reason for that is exactly the issue that you highlighted a moment ago, Matt, which is to the extent our plan looks or feels different, it causes a lot of confusion and it causes a lot of frustration. We talk about the city of Boise, but really we live in the city of the Ada County metro region. And if you've ever looked at the line between Boise and Meridian, you see it's zigzaggy and jagged, and really they're one community from the perspective of a virus. So we want to be as integrated as possible, and we want to have one coherent plan that applies to everybody. But at the same time, obviously the city leadership needs to preserve the flexibility to address breakouts or emergencies as they happen. And so the high level comment is, yes, we will be following the governor's plan. And yes, if the governor permits anyone to do something, our default rule is you'll be permitted to do that unless there's some concrete, compelling thing that we can point to that says, I'm sorry, because of this, we have to be a little bit more restrictive in this way. Does that answer your question, Matt?
Absolutely. It sure does. We know that the city reserves the right to make decisions as necessary for the health and safety of our citizens, but is operating within the framework of a virus that doesn't observe boundaries. And so thank you for that clarification. Before we go to some questions, I'd like to continue with Dan. Dan, tell us a little bit about what you're doing to help ensure that our local restaurants and our community is able to meet some of these kind of new and complex CDC guidelines.
Thanks very much, Matt, and thanks for having me. I will say that the context is pretty horrific here. Restaurants were down pretty much immediately by 77% when the pandemic came in. And still today, in our portfolio of about 5,000 restaurant clients throughout the United States, restaurants are down on average by 70%. So, they're doing 25 to 30% of the business that they were used to doing. And it's just like getting punched in the stomach, multiple times a day, hearing about, longtime clients, people that have put their entire heart and soul into building their business and building an amazing place, like Bardenay, but not Bardenay. Bardenay's not saying that about them, but other places that have really put their heart and soul, that have had to close their doors or had to lay off their entire staff or had to lay off the vast majority of their staff. So, it's just horrific and heartbreaking. There are a couple little points of good news. One is that we're seeing restaurants that are using our online ordering tools that we have at Gravity are doing roughly double the business on average compared to ones that are not. So that's been something that we've been putting into place to allow people to pay with a credit card over their computer, pay with a credit card on their phone. And that way it reduces the amount of interaction and the time that's happening at the actual restaurant. So we're trying to move as much of that transaction as possible to home. The other thing that we're seeing is individual businesses just doing extraordinary things to overcome the challenge of the pandemic. There's a business in Central Washington called Red Door Cafe. And the owners there have pivoted and turned their restaurant into more of a market / to-go business. And that has worked out really well for them, so well that actually their revenue has been 100% of what it was prior to the pandemic, during the pandemic. So, they're an amazing example. And, we're seeing really heroic effort, but the macro statistics are so difficult. And what I do want to emphasize too is there's a lot of uncertainty right now as to what the future holds, because, from a virus standpoint, there's still a lot that's unknown. And so, the restaurants that we're talking to and seeing right now are in many cases preparing for all scenarios. So preparing for reopening that goes well, and then kind of a reintegration and a rebuilding of consumer confidence to go and sit at a restaurant is kind of one case scenario on the one side. And on the other hand, we could have some type of a double second wave type scenario and third wave, in the fall and at other times. And so we're hearing from restaurants that they're preparing for this to go on, for months and months. And not necessarily having a certainty that we'd all like to have that, this is going to be over in a couple weeks and consumers are going to kind of forget about it and be ready to reengage.
Thanks, Dan. That's a big piece of this is while we may move to reopen, the larger question is about consumer confidence and whether consumers will feel comfortable coming back to restaurants and actually sitting in restaurants and participating in what we've always considered one of our most popular social events. And that's a great way to pivot to Kevin. Thanks for being here today. Kevin, given your knowledge and in fact the experiences you had right at the beginning of this outbreak, maybe you could give us some insight into best practices coming out of the Restaurant Association and some of the best practices that have been put in guidance by the governor as you also sit on his task force. So welcome and thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Happy to be here today. I'll try and kind of put this all together so that it makes sense. You know, the governor has put together a task force made up of a little over 30 people from throughout the state representing kind of all aspects of business. And there's a few of us that represent the hospitality industry. And, you know, this thing is moving so fast that there's sometimes things have to move before faster than we would like them to move, I think, in this environment. So what the governor has done is really picked up a lot of the federal guidance coming out of the administration back in D.C. and applied that. And then our committee's task is to take a look at things. Sometimes those rules have come out before we have a chance to opine on them a little bit, and also try and kind of help him understand how they would apply to our businesses going forward. So it's been a real privilege to serve on the task force, but it's also been very interesting in that we can provide guidance on how things would apply, and also as well as kind of what we think we need going forward. And the key things really are we need our employees to be comfortable coming back to work and our customers to be comfortable coming back to work. And so we do have these federal guidelines that talk about 6-foot spacing. There is, unfortunately, there's a dichotomy or difference between restaurants and bars. That guidance came out of DC where there's 50 different states and there's 1,000 different ways to define a restaurant and a bar. And in our state, there's some difficulties in the way that applies to bars. So you might have seen some of the noise. There's been some articles in the paper. I know Channel 7 had an article about the difference between restaurants and bars. So our committee's trying to kind of provide some advice, but sometimes the guidance has to come out faster than we can actually have input. But at the end of the day, we did see a survey the other day that 75% of Idahoans think the governor's doing a nice job of trying to lead us through this. And I think that's a really high rating in these uncertain times. You know, it's unfortunate. People aren't, nobody loves uncertainty, and that's what we're stuck with. But we do know that there are some things that we can do as restaurants coming out. And a lot of the guidance that as I understand it, comes to me through the National Restaurant Association. I do serve on their board still, and they kind of have two channels. And as operators, we need guidance for safety, but we also need it for proper operations. And that's one of the beauties of being involved with the National Restaurant Association and the State Association. The National Restaurant Association has put together a lot of great training for safety during these times. They've always done Serve Safe for alcohol, Serve Safe for food handlers. Our company has required training through those programs for years. The state now requires training through similar programs, and the requirements for training for restaurant managers and things have been strengthened over the years. But the Restaurant Association is really, just this morning, I spent 15 minutes online, got special training on reopening restaurants for COVID, and there wasn't really anything so much that's new in there as maybe just kind of the urgency, importance. And outside of the way that we normally run restaurants, some of the things that have been added to the advice are face masks. You know, for years, we've always dealt with the risk of norovirus, which is nobody wants to get that. It's horrible. It's highly infectious, but it's a known entity. We've dealt with food poisoning. Remember, it wasn't that long ago that Boise had the third largest foodborne illness outbreak in the nation one year. So as a restaurant operators, we're used to this stuff and we have had training for it. Now we're just coming back and revisiting the training. The standard procedures that we do for sanitization will control this. The frequency which we need to do that is kind of that new unknown, the addition of face masks, other guidance we've received. And it's been amazing to see how quickly the ability to do some of these things we've never taken reservations at the Bardenay. We've kind of been proud of that and figured it would be too difficult. But starting either today or tomorrow, you will be able to reserve a table at the Bardenay. It was something that our point of sale provider added. Actually, there's another service that we'd signed on for my new restaurant in Eagle, which was open for one dinner and one lunch prior to the shutdown, is going to allow us to take our spaced out tables. We're going to 6 foot spacing, which is the federal guidance. There is some confusion in our state, and that somehow some guidance got issued that said 10 feet, and people glommed onto that. But 6 feet is what the CDC is recommending, as well as the National Restaurant Association, Ed Foundation, etc. So these things will help us manage that, the timing of people coming into the restaurants, how we separate them, keep them from huddling up, I guess, will help us control just the overall number of guests, be in compliance. There's suggestions that you limit your restaurants to 50%. In our case, the Bardenay, 6 foot spacing puts us at about 33% spacing, or 33% of our average seating. So there's a lot of things that we will be doing that we've always done. There's a few things that are new, and it is that spacing. So we now will have a full-time sanitizer on the job instead of expecting the servers to sanitize the table between guests, which we've always done. Now we'll have a staff person that will help assist with that. More frequent wiping down of faucets, door handles, trying to keep doors open when we can. New thing, and that is restaurants are being encouraged to monitor their employees' health. We actually now just picked up an app that an employee will have to fill out every day, stating that they have not had exposure, that they're not running a temperature, they don't have any of the 5 or 6 symptoms. And in addition, we're able to take their temperature with a touchless thermometer. That is something that the feds have now come out and said, you can legally do this. We don't have to worry about, we can't share the information wide, but it won't be a HIPAA violation or a privacy violation if we do that. So I think, there's concern going forward that we have enough sanitizer. It seems like the sanitizer crisis is diminishing. We've been able to make a small amount of sanitizer. I think our largest customer has been the city of Boise. We've done helped out the state patrol so they could have it in their officers' cars. We've made sure our employees are well stocked up. We've been selling it as part of our to-go program, along with toilet paper and bleach, and the demands for those items has been dropping, which is great to see. Now, as restaurants do open up, seeing that we continue to have a good supply of gloves, I think is important. I know that the Cisco, Shamrock have been, now we've got a month and a half or 2 months under our belt of really stocking up on the PPE stuff. And then just the technology that's been coming out from companies like Dan's amazing. We now have touchless pay. Will be active. It just rolled out the other day. Like I said, we now have the app to do employee health monitoring. Just signed up with that yesterday. The reservation system's new. It is going to be a new day in restaurants, but what we've seen from our experience, so we shut down for 2 weeks totally, and we opened up about 3 weeks ago for to-go. And seeing every time we add a familiar menu item, that seems to be what people want. So it doesn't do us any good to open up and not be able to not have guests, I guess. And so the more normal we can make things feel, the more popular that item seems to be. I can put it that way. I've gotten more than one email from people saying, man, having a meatloaf sandwich sure made my day. So that's kind of, there is this Central District Health, is we've all submitted plans to them, pretty basic, because like I said, for the most part, what we have to do as restaurants is what we've always done. Just a little more diligence, add the face mask, add the employee health monitor. We've always had employee health monitoring. Now we can actually take their temperature. We do have some guidance for paid time off now that's new for people that actually are COVID, have a COVID-related concern. I think, like I said, I could go on for hours. You know, that's kind of the health side. We have the regulatory side. And that's been really fun with the National Restaurant Association. They were very influential in obtaining the PPP funding that companies like mine have obtained, and have allowed us to bring a lot more employees back. There's a tremendous amount of risk in that PPP if you don't use it properly. The repayments are draconian. And so now we're kind of pivoting. Once we get open, hopefully on Saturday, we'll be pivoting towards making sure that we maximize the use of the PPP and helps us continue to be a healthier company.
Kevin,
one of the things, Matt, along those lines that Kevin's talking about is that you really want that to be forgiven because of how quickly you do have to repay it is not really practical for a restaurant. But the forgiveness is capped based on the number of full-time employees that you have versus what you previously had. So at a restaurant, if you're telling the restaurant you can only work at 50% capacity, right, and therefore you only have 50 or 60 or 70% of the employees, then you're capping out the forgiveness that you get and putting yourself into that really difficult situation that Kevin's mentioning. And so I think the PPP was really misdesigned in certain ways from our use. I've probably heard from 25 business owners who are not in the restaurant industry say that they're going to be profitable because of the PPP, or they might have their best year ever from a cash standpoint because of the PPP. And of course, these are things that they would never say publicly or never say out loud. But I'm a part of Young Presidents Organization. I'm a part of Entrepreneurs Organization, where you have kind of these more medium-sized type businesses that are in industries that aren't as affected. So I think we need to ask legislatively on a federal level for changes, for allowances specifically for the restaurant industry. I mean, the restaurant industry is such an important part of our economy. It's grown so much, but I think our government doesn't really fully understand that yet. They don't deal with it as a standalone entity, which they really should. And I think what we really need is we need rent and mortgage deferrals for all restaurants nationwide. I mean, if you just took 3 months or 6 months, depending on how long some of these things go on, and hopefully if we can avoid the second wave, but if we don't, some period of time, and you just move rent or mortgage, to the end, and just add a couple months to whatever the obligation is at the end, you keep your space for an extra few months, something like that. I know probably there are some people that wouldn't like that and would be inconvenienced and be a little bit less wealthy. But I don't think the solutions that we're offering, I mean, they're almost insulting to restaurant owners when you look at the situation that they're in.
Yeah, the PPP program for restaurants in particular, which just saw that, like you said at the beginning, a 70% immediate drop off in business, it makes it very difficult to capitalize on the forgiveness aspect of it if your operations are at 20% of capacity. There are a couple questions that have come in that I just would like to get a little bit of clarification on. I think, Kevin, that's probably your department. One is, I haven't heard of a shortage of disinfectants and like commercial cleaning agents. And there's a question that came across that indicated that there might be a shortage of cleaning agents for businesses. And I was just wondering if you could speak to that, but I was unaware of that.
And now for everyday cleaners, that we use Quat sanitizers, bleach. There's no shortage that I'm aware of. We've been assured there's very good supplies. The areas where we have concerns is now the demand use for glove usage is going to go way up as we open up. And so that's kind of the supply that we're most concerned about. Masks. I think the masks, I've been assured that Cisco has a bunch of them in their warehouse, a bunch coming in. So I don't think there will be an issue. Hand sanitizer was the one that caused hand sanitizer and toilet paper were the ones that were the greatest concerns. And as I said, that we're not getting the number of calls of concern for hand sanitizer that we were.
And Patrick, a question that I have is the restaurants are encouraged to submit plans to the Central Health District in order to reopen. And the Central Health District will give them an approval based on the plans. But is the city coordinating with that? And is that required of restaurants, or do you have any insight on that?
Thanks. I don't have a tremendous amount of insight on that because we're not in stage 2 yet, and we haven't we haven't put together what our stage 2 order will be. That'll be dependent on what is actually going on in Ada County. If I was going to try to read tea leaves, which I'm terrible at, and it's never good practice to do, my guess would be that the city of Boise, it seems likely that we will require a plan to be submitted to the Department of Public Health. Whether we will require the Department of Public Health to have approved that plan, or the logistics of how that will fit together, I don't know yet, and I don't think anybody does. But it's something that, frankly, I would hope that anybody opening a business has some sort of plan in place for protecting the community, and I would suspect that pretty much everybody who opens a business does. I'm dancing around. Right? I really want to be able to say, here is the clear answer. I know the state is not going to require it, but whether we do in Boise is something that we'll have to decide.
I guess I should have clarified. The state has a requirement that it's turned in, but there is no approval process for it in place. And I was just wondering if the city was planning to have an approval process.
I'm not aware of any plan for an independent city approval process. And I would be concerned about a policy from the city that said, well, you must have an approved plan if the state is not approving plans. That's going to put everybody in a jam in an already very difficult time. But as Kevin pointed out, everything seems to change from day to day, and nobody is really completely up to speed with what the state is going to do, because it's trying hard to react in real time as well. So we're going to try to follow the state as best we can, and we're going to try to be as in line with the state as we possibly can. But in the specifics of what our stage 2 plan will look like, we won't know until we're there.
There are some specific questions that honestly are, I think, what restaurants are dealing with. One is, let's say that a restaurant has permanent booths in their facility. How do you get that 6-foot distance? And maybe, Kevin, you can speak to some of the creativity that restaurant entrepreneurs are going to have to put in place in order to effectively reopen with permanent seating and other things like that.
So some of the guidance that I've read, and I've circled back around to try and find where this is, if you're sitting back to back in a booth, then you're going to meet the spacing by the time you get to the next booth. So that type of booth seating is fine. I think it's where you get into other configurations where you're going to just have to block it off. I read an article. There's a restaurant back in Washington, D.C. that's actually brought in mannequins and is using them to take up tables so there will be some creativity, but we're concerned about people breathing on people. And if you're back to back, you're getting your distance.
But I do know, Matt, John Howie Steakhouse here in Seattle, he's closing every other booth in that situation. That's what he had done prior to our closure. Of course, we're not opening up the way Idaho is quite yet. But, I've definitely seen people do that. I don't know if that's, I agree with Kevin on the requirement, but yeah, it's been all over the place.
Dan, I think this question is great for you, and maybe other people can chime in. There has been a huge concern, especially as restaurants have moved to online ordering and online delivery systems, that some of the big companies out there like Uber Eats and DoorDash take an enormous chunk off the top. So much so that it makes some restaurants unable to really even pencil out the details of it if you take a 30% cut. What is Gravity Payments doing, and what are some of the best practices so that restaurants can move to CDC, touchless payment, and other things, but not be gouged by some of these companies?
Yeah, well, I think engaging customers, but again, kind of pulling back and looking at the context, this type of thing has happened before in this industry. Some of you might remember a company called Groupon that promised, buy this coupon, come in, basically give away your product and it'll be good for customer acquisition, was kind of how they pitched it. Or another situation that's analogous is Open Table, where they tell you, oh, we're going to bring you diners. We want to charge you for bringing you those diners. That's a valuable service. And next thing you know, they're buying your keywords and even the name of your business on Google searches and basically trying to go after your existing customers and claim that they brought you your existing customers and take that large fee. So, this type of predatory practice against the restaurants is not anything that's new. And you can see why it's appealing. If you need to figure out how to get more sales and somebody can bring you sales, that's an appealing pitch. But what we're seeing is there is a lot of cannibalization. What I mean by that is existing diners who would like to support your business think that they can do that by ordering from Uber Eats. And with Uber Eats taking a 30% cut, it just completely guts the business model, right? Restaurants are not making 30%. And so what we've been doing first and foremost on that is not anything related to payments or technology. We've just been trying to raise awareness about that for consumers, because if consumers understand how their community restaurants like Bardenay that Kevin has, like other community restaurants, if they understand that they're on the ropes, consumers, many of whom, if they're not in a vulnerable position, are willing to put in the extra effort, make the drive, especially during this time, to save that 30%. And it was just shocking when I started getting the word out. I was hearing from 95% of people that they were just shocked at how much Uber Eats charges, and they thought they were doing that restaurant a great service by ordering Uber Eats. And so what I'm asking restaurants to do first and foremost is tell your customers that it's better for you, if it indeed it is, for them to come and pick up the food and put in that extra effort to make it work. And a lot of your customers will. And I really think using Uber Eats, it's kind of like something that when you start, it seems like a good thing, but I think over time it becomes worse. And they start to cap you out in terms of the sales they bring to the table. And they also start to take your customers and send them to other businesses while they also bring you business. And so I don't think it's all what it's cracked up to be. At least here in Seattle, the city has capped to 15% the commissions that Uber Eats charges. I think that we should do the same thing in Boise, if not even cap it at a lower rate. And at Gravity, it's really just about having all of those tools for the pickup. Of course, we're trying to figure out like a delivery system, and that's something that's been really difficult to figure out. But I think, some of these gimmicks they're oriented toward the consumer, and they're oriented toward basically consolidating all that consumer demand and then leveraging it to give the restaurant a deal that they really can't turn down, but it's a horrible deal. And so I think just raising awareness about this with restaurants, with consumers, we've talked with a number of our clients about maybe establishing a cooperative, but immediately setting up mobile ordering, online ordering, having contactless payments, having text to pay, having something where you can move the payment even outside of the restaurant location. Those are the things that we're bringing to the table right now to help. But it really, unfortunately, is being put, 99% of the work still is being put on the restaurant owner, because even when you use all that technology, you still have to hustle and make it work.
Kevin, there's a couple questions. Maybe you can speak to how you're doing it and your experience with delivery. But the other question that a number of people have asked is, what's the app that you're using to monitor your employees? And is it something that is affordable app that folks can use?
Monitor their health, by the way. He's not monitoring his employees in other ways. We should be very clear about that.
Monitoring their employees' health. I apologize. Clarification.
While I'm looking for the name of that app, Dan and I couldn't have put that any better. We don't use delivery services for that reason. We would be paying for food to go out our door using that. There's nobody that I know that even makes 15% margin. So.
But we need to educate both the consumer and the restaurant, right? Because if every other restaurant around you starts to use it, and then they start to train, Uber Eats starts to train your consumers just to press a button and expect things to show up. And that's where we really need to get the word out.
Yeah. So during this time, I've been taking advantage of calling my fellow Restaurant Association board members throughout the country, and called my buddy who runs some quick service operations in Seattle and Washington and Alaska. And that's where I found out about this app. And it's actually a spinoff from a secret shopping app. And it's $12.50 a month per location to try it out. No setup fee. It's very inexpensive. We will go live with it on Saturday. And I can't think of the name of it. But it was one of those calls. So I've called friends in Iowa, Texas, Rhode Island, Georgia, Washington, to try and see what's going on with those guys, because this thing's moving so quickly. For us, trying to figure out how busy we're going to be when we open. The new restaurant has always taken reservations from day one. It did for its one whole dinner and one whole lunch. And we've got over 190 reservations for Saturday. It will be our biggest day ever.
Right.
So we're pretty excited about it.
So for clarification for the folks that are listening, we'll post the name of that app as soon as Kevin gets it. We'll just post it in the comments for folks that have questions.
Can I back up real quick to the Central District Health? They sent me 4 different emails yesterday. Each one had a 3 or 4 page questionnaire attached. All you have to do is go through and say, yes, we'll socially distance at least 6 feet. Yes, we will check employees' health. It's really easy. Run through it, put your name on it, sign it, check the boxes you're going to do. Bang, it's done. So that is the requirement. State said you have to turn it in. I did all 4 of mine for down here yesterday in about half an hour.
And a couple more clarifications. As part of that, one of the questions is it mandatory for employees to wear masks at all times? Is that becoming something similar to the use of gloves in restaurants? Where's the guidance on that, Kevin?
That's an internal decision. It is recommended best practice, and from what I'm talking to other people throughout the country, it also, the most important thing we can do is send a signal to our customers that we're concerned, and a mask is a huge positive signal. So it's not mandated at this point in time, unlike gloves have been for a long time for anything that's not going to be cooked.
One thing though, Matt, on that, just to be very careful of, is to let employees know, because it's so hard to not touch the front of your mask when you're using a mask.
Right.
And if you have a gloved hand and you touch the front of your mask, then the potential viral load in that connection is something that is not going to make the consumer comfortable, like if they see that. And so in some cases, it's better to actually not wear a mask than you wear a mask and touch it. And so that part of the training, I think, needs to be really emphasized to employees. I just, kind of going around town at grocery stores and restaurants and other places, frequently I'm seeing people use a gloved hand and touch the front of their mask.
You know what the biggest problem is going to be? Is employees pulling their mask down so they can unlock their phone. I don't know how many times I've seen it.
So this is a question that has actually come up multiple times, so I thought I'd just post it up here. But how do you measure 6 feet? Is it 6 feet from the back of the chair? Is it 6 feet from the center of the table? Do we have specific guidance on that, or is there best practices that have been put out by the CDC?
The descriptions are 6 feet from table to table. So what we've done is really measured out 6 feet and kind of figured out how the chairs are going to go so that we maintain that 6 feet between people. And not seating our bars gives us a 6-foot walkway for everything. So, that's for a restaurant whose bread and butter is having people come in and shove tables together and form big groups. It's been interesting spreading them out. So, but that's what we're going by, that 6 feet. Table to table should give us 6 feet from guest to guest when you move things around. It's quite spacious.
So let's talk about touchless services, because there are unintended consequences of going to entirely disposable products. Is there a way, and this is a question that came in early, is there a way to still use reusable plateware, reusable silverware, and be sanitary, or is that off the table, and is it everybody going with disposable products, and what's the ultimate impact on our environment?
We're going to stay with our traditional metal forks, spoons. That our understanding, this virus is easy to kill. That as long as you take the standard steps, our everyday cleaners, our high temp dish machine, all those things will deal with it very, very well.
Great. But one of the guidance that I saw would be, what are we doing with menus? I mean, menus are a high contact location. I know there are services out there. Where are we at with dealing with things that multiple customers would come into contact with upon entering the restaurant?
Well, so that is one area where, if, depending upon your setup, you're going to need to go with disposable menus. So we have a high quality printer that actually prints on paper that we can, we'll use some of our alcohol sanitizer on it and sanitize it for people that actually need a menu. Sysco Foods has, we let them know we want a QR code, and that will take you, they'll digitize our menu, put it online. We're doing that for coins. For Bardenay, about 4 years ago, we built an app that is our menu, and people go out and pull that off Apple. And I believe we're getting that set back up. So there are ways to easily get it so customers can get their menu on the phone. And like I said, it took a couple minutes for Sysco to do it for us. And it's a service they're more than happy to provide. So people shouldn't need to use a dirty menu.
Dan, are you doing any touchless menus? Patrick, do you know anything about touchless menus and some of the other, receipts, those payment pockets that come through? I mean, those are the areas where getting that under control is an opportunity for entrepreneurs, number one, but number two, it is where transmission could take place.
Yeah. I mean, well, go ahead, Patrick.
Oh yeah, there are, Kevin is right. There are a lot of app-based solutions for this. Lingo is a company that does that, Lingo. We're always behind the curve in the United States on a lot of things. Most of our credit cards can be tapped at most credit card readers. They don't need to be passed around and swiped. That's something culturally we don't do here. This event hopefully is going to continue to force us to move into the modern world in productive ways. Apps like Lingo, Sysco's service, and touchless credit card swiping they're all within our grasp, so to speak. And hopefully we will continue to move towards those. This might nudge us along.
There also, Matt, have been some states who have issued grants to restaurants for some of these tools and touchless solutions. We're starting to see that with a few states in the Southeast, but I think it's a good idea, because I think one of the things that this is teaching us is if we have some public investment in public health, we don't put it all onto individuals and small businesses. And so getting some of those grants, and so yes, we have solutions for all of these things. It still takes a fair amount of hustling to put them into play. And I think we need to, as a community, recognize how hard these businesses are working to implement the standards and provide financial support for that implementation.
The governor of Idaho is one of the states that's doing that, because like we talked about earlier, the PPP program hasn't worked for a lot of restaurants. And so the governor has issued what he's calling Idaho Rebound Cash Grants. These are $10,000 cash grants to be used for operations and moving into a situation where they can actually provide the services they need to preserve and be in accordance with the state's guidelines and CDC's guidelines. So for those restaurant owners that are concerned, seriously look at those Idaho Rebound grants. The application is online at rebound.idaho.gov, and it closes at the end of the week. So it opened on Monday, and there's a lot of opportunity for restaurants to get those grants. And I appreciate, Dan, you bringing that up. Just a couple more questions before we close out for the day. What are the thoughts or guidance on front of house employees wearing gloves? They're not handling food. Is it important for them to wear gloves, or what is your strategy, Kevin?
We're going to ask them to wear gloves anytime they're delivering, anytime they change from one table to another, wash their hands, change their gloves so that they're not moving any germs that might be at this table over to that table. That is new for us, because traditionally they're not supposed to be sticking their thumbs into the food. But we think it's similar. I mean, the masks have a safety purpose as well as a messaging purpose, and gloves have a safety purpose and a messaging purpose. As long as, a dirty glove's just as bad as a dirty hand. So
right.
That will really be the high bar for us, I think. It's kind of like not pulling down your mask to turn on your phone. We're going to be policing that all the time. We saw you at that table. Go wash your hands. Put on a new glove. So it'll be interesting. But you know what's the great thing about it is we have a lot of people that are really tired of sitting around the house, want to come back to work. We've kept a significant number of people working already. I think people are going to be, really happy to be back at work and ready to provide a really good experience for our customers. And it's been interesting that there's a lot of temperatures are raised. People are on edge, and so getting restaurants back, I think, is a huge part of getting us back to doing things we enjoy.
This question came up, and I want to just answer it directly. On the PPP grants, the way that the Idaho Rebounds cash grants are designed is folks who have received a PPP grant in excess of $10,000 are not currently eligible for the first round of loans from the state. That may change later on, but this first round are for those folks who really weren't qualified for any of the federal loans, including an insurance payout of $10,000, a economic injury and disaster loan from the SBA, or a PPP loan. So for those of you that are thinking about it, if you weren't qualified or your insurance company denied you a payout for your business disruption insurance, then this is the place where you can go to get these cash grants. And it's a good question, and there's been a lot of confusion because there are so many programs right now to help restaurants that hoping to provide some guidance there. We have about 4 more minutes before I'd like to kind of end this, and I thought I'd start. Patrick, do you have any closing comments that you'd like to offer from the city's perspective?
Yeah, I tried, I guess, pretty hard to answer some technical questions as clearly as I could. And it wasn't very clear because it's a dynamic situation and it's moving and it's changing. But something I didn't touch on is, we know it's hard, and we know that businesses are suffering. That's not magic buzzword stuff. Businesses are suffering means people are not getting the money that they need to live. People are not supporting their employees and giving their employees the living wage that they expect to. People are not engaging and participating and supporting the community in the economic way that is their lifestyle and is their life's work and that they're proud of. And it's terrifying and it's frustrating and it's awful. And our goal is certainly to get everybody back, bring back a healthy, vibrant, prosperous Boise. The challenge is doing that in a way that doesn't make things worse down the line with a future spike or resurgence of this virus. And so I can talk all day in a mumbo jumbo way about, we're going to dovetail with the state, and unless there's a reason to deviate, and give you the kind of wonky answer. But I don't want to lose sight of the fact that, we hear you and we understand that this is awful, and that it seems like everything that happens is another constraint and another burden and another ask for sacrifice, and it is, and we know that, and we really appreciate how wonderful everyone in our restaurant community has been with supporting our efforts to control a public health emergency. We know we're asking a lot, and we're grateful for it.
Dan, any recommendations or advice you can give before we sign out?
Yeah, so we have spent so far $4 trillion bailing out corporate America, propping up the stock market. And that has value. It's not like that's completely wasted money. But if you think about $4 trillion in a country with 300 million people or so, it's a tremendous investment that we're making when 50% of all stocks are owned by the top 1% out there. We're seeing Amazon, Walmart at all-time highs right now in value. So there's a huge consolidation, and it's been going on for a long time. 40 years ago, the top 100 corporations in the United States made 40% of the profit. Today, it's 90%. And so small businesses' share of the pie is on a fast track to zero. And so if you run a small business here and you think it's getting harder in certain ways, you're correct. Now, there are certainly exceptions. There are people who just are so exceptional at what they do. They're continuing to thrive. And it's really amazing to see the fight and the journey of the 20,000 small business clients that I get to work with every day. It's really inspirational to see. But I just want to be clear about the context of what those people are up against in this situation due to the decisions that we have made overall collectively as a society. And the question that I would kind of leave with on that topic is, how far would it have to go before we decide to hold people accountable, even if they're a member of a political party that we've supported in the past, even if they're a part of a political party that we've supported for our whole life? How bad would it have to be? Where's your line? And maybe that hasn't been crossed so far, but have a line in mind of where that accountability starts, because I think far too few of us are really looking and seeing like where a lot of this power is coming from and the way big money is being converted into big power and then back to big money. And that is creating those very big long-term trends. And the little guy out there has never been squeezed harder in certain ways on a relative basis in terms of a share of the pie as today. So, at Gravity, like, we exist to stand with the little gal, guy, person. And we're just trying to fight along with you. I think our company philosophy is that we can make a bigger difference in the next 16 months than we have in our 16-year past. And, we're just going to try to go down swinging. It's hard to, in a format like this, go through all of the different solutions that we're bringing to market that affect different people in different situations, that will make a difference, that will help. But if anybody would like, you can email me personally. My email address is dprice@gravitypayments.com or dan@gravitypayments.com. And if you want to know about what we're doing to try to help, provide that solution, but really, I just want to say to all the people fighting out there to save a job or save a business, I'm inspired by you. I know you're not going to be sitting around thinking about how the situation's unfair, because that's just not what your DNA is. But I think that you deserve a better deal, and let's all fight together to make that happen.
Thanks, Dan. Kevin, you're a longtime restaurateur. You're well known in the state. Any recommendations to some of these restaurants that are looking at a precipice, and some ideas to help guide them, hopefully, back to prosperity?
Oof, especially after Dan's comments there, which were, I think, all really good. This is an interesting time, and it reminds me quite a bit of 2008 when, 2007, everybody in the restaurant industry was cutting a fat hog, and people were raising their prices and busy as they could ever be. And the rest of people were opening restaurants left and right, and we were overbuilt, and we had a correction in the economy, and it caused a lot of restaurants, was the end of them. And it's unfortunate. And, the timing for this, and especially in the Boise, in Idaho, most restaurants, they make their money in the summer, and March can oftentimes be the biggest month for us, because if the weather's good, people are excited to get out, the patios open back up. And we just, I purposely managed my cash flow to be at its thinnest point right when we went into the pandemic. And so I think we do need to be sensitive. We need to get out and support restaurants. We need to be aware that the restaurant scene will change, that we have a lot of capacity, and we cannot, not everyone will survive this. And it's really unfortunate. There are resources out there. The Triple P, if you apply it properly, can be a help. The $10,000 grants are for those people who can't get the Triple P. There's EIDL loans also that have that can be an advantage. So there are resources, but you gotta keep looking around. You cannot continue to do exactly what you used to do. If you're not flexible, if you're not willing to look at change, you're going to continue to have problems. And I think that, you know, our company philosophy, we came out at 2008 healthier than ever. And we made some really significant changes in the way I dealt as a manager. And we are seeing so many new things that we thought about doing reservations. We thought about doing online ordering. We thought about that, but we were too darn busy. And we haven't had that problem now for a couple months. And those have been great tools for us to add. And so I think that people do in our business, you got to back up and look at what your customer wants and look at so many of these tools now. You can access them for next to nothing to try them out. And there's a lot of help out there. And that's really, I think, the big message is don't clam up. Don't get angry. It won't do you any good. Look at what you can do. And yeah, I'm so proud of my staff. We've got 18 of us that have chatted all but two days now since this thing hit. And I think we have a better, healthier relationship than we've ever had. So we don't have nearly the net worth or the revenue, but we think it is going to come back really strong. And, you know, I think we have to realize that not every restaurant will come out of this hole. But I think the industry overall will be healthier. And it's a great industry to be in. I don't think people realize how much fun and profitable it can be. But it's a serious business. You got to run it like a business.
Thanks to all three of you. Just a couple things. Later today, the Boise Chamber will release a document that has collated a lot of the guidance across the country from the CDC, from the governor, and from Central Health District to try to provide a concise document to help people get themselves back to work as we hopefully, fingers crossed, move to phase 2 later this afternoon and on Saturday. That will come out. It's got some guidance for restaurants and for indoor gyms and other groups. We look forward to releasing that. Additionally, there was a question about the tourism industry. This one's focused on restaurants, but we will do a seminar for the tourism industry. And then last but not least, I want to thank Gravity Foods, or Shamrock Foods, Gravity Payments, and Cisco Foods, and our three guests, Kevin, Patrick, and Dan. We appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. We appreciate your commitment to the Boise Metro Chamber, and we look forward to seeing everybody else on the other side. Thanks a lot.